Black Sabbath, the Dark Lord and his disciples. Black Sabbath are undoubtedly one of the most influential metal bands of all time. But how did they go from a small-town skiffle group to global domination? Let's find out. Our story begins in the town of Birmingham, England, and while there were many significant events that took place here, the city is most notable for two things: the brutal executions that took place at its central jail during the 18th and 19th centuries, and it's also the birthplace of heavy metal. It was here in the mid-60s that a young man named Tony Martin would begin his musical career. A shy and unassuming kid, he never really fit in and spent most of his free time playing guitar in his bedroom. Then one day in 1967, everything changed. He saw the Beatles play live on television and was immediately hooked. He bought himself an amplifier and started performing covers of Beatles songs in local clubs. Not long after, he met another musician named John Michael Pearson, now known as Geezer Butler. They soon formed a band with a couple of other musicians and began playing gigs around town. But just a few months later, the band split up and Butler went on to join another group called Rare Breed. This was around the same time that Tony had a near-death experience and joined the army. Both Butler and Tony were sent to fight in the war in Vietnam, but they both came back home alive and soon got back into music. Meanwhile, another young man named William Ward was drumming in a band called Earth. They played blues-based rock and roll and even toured with the Rolling Stones. But unfortunately, the band wasn't very successful and eventually broke up. Bill was then recruited by Butler to play drums in his new band, which also included guitarist Tony Iommi and vocalist Ozzy Osbourne. Iommi had been playing rhythm guitar for a band called Pocahontas, but was now struggling to make ends meet. To help pay the bills, he took a job at a car factory where he ended up having a freak accident that left him with permanently damaged fingertips. He thought his music career was over, but fortunately for him, Butler called him to ask if he wanted to play in his band. Now, before we get any further, it should be noted that there are some differing accounts about how the band came to be. Some say that Butler actually formed the band with Ozzy first, while others claim it was Iommi and Butler. Regardless, this lineup was clearly destined for greatness. Ozzy had always been drawn to the darker side of life and was fascinated with horror films and the occult. This macabre outlook on life was evident in his music, which featured lyrics about witches, Satanism, and cannibalism. While the band didn't have a name yet, their music caught the attention of a local club owner who booked them to play his venue. On their first night, they performed songs by artists like Cream and the Kinks, but also a couple of original songs, one of which was called Black Sabbath. The name stuck, and the band became known as Black Sabbath. In the meantime, Geezer Butler had moved in with Bill Ward, and the two had become roommates. One day, they decided to write a song together, and came up with a track called Evil Woman. Soon after, Tony Iommi moved in with them, and the three began writing songs together. Around this time, they auditioned more than 40 different singers before settling on Ozzy Osbourne, who happened to be a friend of Butler's girlfriend. Their first gig as Black Sabbath was at the Crown in Stafford on September 14, 1969. Even though their set lasted only 20 minutes, the crowd loved them, and word of their incredible live shows spread throughout the region. But it wasn't just their music that made them so popular. Fans also loved the band's dark sense of humor and theatrical live shows. Ozzy would jump off speakers and crawl through the audience while singing. Meanwhile, Geezer Butler would jump around and dance like a madman. Iommi stayed close to the amps and let loose with furious guitar riffs, and Bill Ward pounded on his drums like his very life depended on it. However, not everyone in the music industry appreciated their unique brand of heavy metal. In fact, most critics hated it. There was also the small matter of the band being banned from the BBC, due to the controversial nature of their music. But none of this deterred them from continuing to play. As the band honed their sound, they decided to shop around for a record deal. After approaching several labels, they finally got one with Vertigo Records, who agreed to release their self-titled debut album in January of 1970. Despite getting mostly bad reviews, the album went gold and established the band as one of the leading lights of the burgeoning heavy metal genre. A second album, Paranoid, followed in September of 1970 and was a huge success. It reached no one on the UK charts and spawned several hit singles, including Iron Man and Paranoid. With their popularity skyrocketing, the band embarked on a tour of the United States in 1971. Unfortunately, Ozzy's drug and alcohol abuse became a problem, and he was arrested several times for disorderly conduct and public intoxication. Despite this, the tour was considered a success, and the band returned to the UK as heroes. It was clear that Black Sabbath had achieved global domination, but it wasn't without its problems. Geezer Butler was becoming increasingly frustrated with Ozzy's antics and his inability to stay sober. Things came to a head when the band was recording their next album in 1973, and Ozzy showed up drunk and high, more often than not. After listening to playback of one of the tracks, Butler confronted Ozzy about his performance, and the singer responded by sticking his middle finger up Butler's nose. It was clear that something had to change, and Butler gave Ozzy an ultimatum: get clean and sober or get out of the band. For a while, Ozzy managed to stay on the straight and narrow, but he eventually fell back into his old habits, and Butler kicked him out of the band. With Ozzy gone, Black Sabbath had to find a new singer. They auditioned quite a few candidates, including former Deep Purple vocalist Ian Gillan, but nobody seemed to be able to fill Ozzy's shoes. It wasn't until they brought in Ronnie James Dio that things really took off. Dio's operatic vocals and impressive stage presence made him the perfect addition to the band. Unfortunately, he didn't stick around for very long. After appearing on 2 albums, he left to pursue a solo career, but Black Sabbath's popularity didn't suffer as a result. They continued to release hit albums throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So there you have it, the story of Black Sabbath. Do you think the band would have been as successful if it weren't for Ozzy Osbourne? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching.